I would love to know in the chat, because this might help if we do some Q&A at the end. Talk to me about your biggest personal struggle finding, pitching, and closing SEO clients. It's something we talk about tons in the blueprint. It's something that's top of mind for me all the time. And it's really what we're going to talk about here today. So drop that in the chat. We might save some of that for later, but it at least gives Ryan and I kind of like a heads up as far as where you're at, why you're here today, what you want to get out of this, that sort of thing. Something we always try to do in Blueprint is tailor everything to what you need versus just what we want to talk about. But I've never seen anybody talk about what we're going to talk about today. I think when it comes to proposals and sales calls, a lot of us are really good at SEO and we're still learning the business side of things. It's a different skill set. It's a different mindset. And the one question that we're not always ready for is, sounds great. How much does it cost? Right? It's like, we get there and we're like, hey, I have a really good idea of where I'm at, what I need to do and everything. And we're like, all right, cool. Here's my price. And we're met with this like meme of hello, darkness, my old friend. And it's just silence. It's just on the other side. They're like, cool. It's, you say like, all right, yep. And investment today is $7,000 over 6 months or whatever it is. You explain it to them. You positioned it really well. You think it's great. And immediately they're just like, how do I get out of here? Like you thought you set it up great. And they're just trying to slink out the window any way they can. And you're just left like praying that you could follow up with them. And you're just hoping that they're going to pay you. And what I want to give you today is a presentation formula, a blueprint, a template, a mindset shift on how to better present this stuff. So in the next couple minutes, here's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to give you that framework. I'm going to explain to you why it works. I'm going to give you everything. I'm going to tell you where I learned this stuff and exactly how I use it to close more clients. If you don't know me, Ryan did mention one of the coaches inside Blueprint. I've been on a bunch of websites that you might have heard of. I've worked with a bunch of companies that you might know. Here's the NASCAR slide. But I'm also going to leverage everything I can from teaching. I was a teacher for 10 years in a former life. Like many people, you don't go to school to start an SEO agency. And I went to college to be a teacher because we let 18-year-olds decide what they want to do with their lives, right? So I'm going to take all of that, all of those teaching chops and bring it into what we're doing today. And I want to start here. When you're doing a proposal, design sells. They have to be able to visualize the value of what we're doing. And it took me a couple of years, and I would say like a few very expensive years to learn this lesson. I used to do, and you don't need much to get started. The proposals, Ryan, it was so embarrassing. The proposals I used to send out were so bad. It was literally like the stock Google Slides template with like the bold header and then just the text and some images. And then I found Blueprint stuff. This is years ago at this point. I found Ryan's stuff at Blueprint, swiped some of that. And then I realized there was more to it just in terms of like what we're saying and what we're talking about. Tell me if you're familiar with any of these movies that are on this slide. Let me know in the chat. Harry Potter, Star Wars, The Matrix, Spider-Man, Lion King, Lord of the Rings. Let's add Indiana Jones, Finding Nemo, Inside Out, Hunger Games, Back to the Future. All of these movies and all of these books and all of these stories follow the same script. And that's the same kind of script that you can use when you do proposals and you do presentations. I should have added a screenshot here to this slide, or maybe the next one. There's a great testimonial come out of Blueprint not that long ago when I shared this internally on one of our coaching calls for a platinum member. And I shared this, what I'm going to share with you now. I shared this with him because that's where I share everything first, is inside Platinum and inside Blueprint. When I shared it with him, he told me it helped him close a $42,000 deal, which is awesome. That you can implement this right away and it'll help you close more. But it's powerful. Because if you think about these stories are timeless. These are people's favorite movies ever. These are people's favorite books. And the framework, you might have never heard of it, or you might have, let me know if you have heard of this, it's called The Hero's Journey. And it started with Joseph Campbell, who wrote this book a long time ago called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, where he noticed this thing called a monomyth, one myth, that throughout all these cultures in history, everybody's stories followed this same pattern that's kind of illustrated here on the right? Everything. And then all of these people, George Lucas, Spielberg, all of these people found it and they're like, why don't we just make our movies follow this same thing? And when they did, it's like, oh, everybody loves this. And why is that? Because a lot of times when we're running the SEO agency, we're the big brain smarty pants and we think we know everything about SEO, and we think to sell, we need to show them how smart we are. And we don't lean into the craft of storytelling and presentation, and even some of the stuff Ryan said a minute ago about tonality and other things, right? There's all these other parts to salesmanship. And I think this is one of the easiest lifts, because what we need to realize is that a lot of times we try to be the hero of this presentation, of this proposal. Look how smart I am. Look how great I am. Look at all these client successes, me. And they can't see themselves in it because they're the hero. You're the guide. You are Gandalf, you are Morpheus, you are Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're Dumbledore, whatever reference hits best with you. You're in that seat, right? So I want to walk you through, this is one of the best sales decks. We're going to merge two ways of thinking here. We're going to merge this hero's journey, and I'm going to walk you through a sales deck, not for SEO specifically, but for software, because I want you to see how it plays in another industry before you apply it to SEO. And I think this is a really important mindset shift. If you're looking to do all of these things, a lot of time you'll get a tremendous benefit from studying other industries. So not just looking at what your competitors are doing, what other SEO agencies are doing. Some of the best stuff that I've done to help me close more sales when I was the SEO director at two different agencies, I was hopping on sales calls constantly. I remember I got yelled at a previous agency that I worked at, where I was just the SEO director. I was leading the SEO team. And I got yelled at by our CEO because the sales team kept pulling me onto calls because our close rate went way up. Because I understood this stuff, because I can close sales, and I see it now in my consultancy, right, where I work with a lot of SaaS companies. So I think this is going to be really helpful for you. Let's dive into this. Also, Ryan, I want to pause real quick. Is there anything important going on in the chat? Any questions so far?
No, people just commenting about how much they love those movies, man.
Rad. There's a reason. So this is a sales deck from Zora. And we're not going to belabor the point of this company and what they do and everything else, but this sales deck is going to follow almost perfectly this hero's journey, right? Starting right here at the beginning of crossing the threshold. So they've felt the call to adventure. The person you are pitching has felt the need to increase their traffic, increase their leads. They're meeting a mentor that is you. Remember, you are the mentor, you are the guide, you are not the hero. And now we're crossing over into this new world where we're going to experience trials and tribulations. So the first thing we want to do in this deck, I'm going to narrate some of this for you, is we have to name a big relevant change in the world. What is the huge change that is happening right now for this particular client? Not in the world of SEO. Don't tell them about the latest Google algorithm update. They don't care about that. Neither should you, for the most part. But what is the big thing that we're seeing happen in the economy? And for Zora, this subscription software company, they start out by saying, like, we now live in a subscription economy. And that is true, right? And then we want to follow that up. I have two different versions of this next slide. So we start out with this slide explaining this huge relevant change in the world. Then we want to show exactly how that change has happened over time. And you don't need the pretty background or any of this other stuff. You can literally just have a slide explaining what has happened and what has changed economically over time that's led us to where we are today. Again, we're tracking in this hero's journey. They've crossed the threshold into this new world. And we're explaining that new kind of dichotomy based on what was before and what is now. This salesmanship is starting to pull them into a story. They're now involved. They're now invested. And they're like, you're right, this is super interesting. And you're talking about these things, especially if you've already done a discovery call, which you should have by the time you're pitching or doing any sort of proposal. You're walking through them, you're walking through the problems they've had and how those problems have evolved over time. And they're like, yes, they get me. We have a shared story, we have a shared history, right? Especially if they're uncomfortable admitting they suffer from a specific problem. We're now talking about how it's a bigger problem. It's a macro problem that we're kind of like walking through here, right? Then they talk about like, hey, this is different ways that it's changed. So we walk through the timeline, we're talking through these different ways that it's changed. And we're now starting to talk about these trials and tribulations, these failures that they've gone through over time. Again, if you've done a discovery call, you know their pain points, you know what they've tried before that hasn't worked, you know what's brought them to speaking with you today. 3 really important questions to ask in a discovery call. We're just reiterating, hey, these are the trials and the failures that have gone on. And we also want to make sure that they're able to see this in our slides. So look, it's 80% of customers are demanding new consumption models. 50% of people in France are moving away from traditional ownership. Like all this different stuff is extremely relevant and really, really valuable. So just explaining again, like this is a macro phenomenon. These struggles that you're dealing with are not necessarily specific to you. Here's where we're seeing them elsewhere with our other clients in other places in the world, et cetera. Bringing them through the story. Every industry is shifting because of this. They're explaining this now in the subscription frame of the subscription economy. We don't need to have all of these slides, but again, like especially if you're watching on the replay, pause here, take note of what's on these slides, use them for yourself. That's why I'm showing you all of these, right? Because now we're going to move into this like growth, these new skills. This is Luke let's bring it back because I love Star Wars. Luke Skywalker meets Obi-Wan Kenobi. He meets the mentor. He crosses the threshold. They get in the Millennium Falcon. They leave the planet. He goes through all these trials and tribulations, and now he starts growing new skills, right? He's learning how to use the Force. He's learning how to hold a lightsaber, that famous scene where he's getting shot with the laser and stuff, right? So what are the new skills that they need to be learning? So it says the best companies reinvented themselves away from products. What is this macro level trend? And this takes a little bit more time, but again, like really leaning into the salesmanship here. Because what we're going to move now into this is what's called in the hero's journey, this death and rebirth, where the old them is going to die. The things that they've done before that didn't work, it's time for them to leave that behind and be reborn in this new relationship, in this new thing. And this is where we would present our solution, right? The things that we're going to offer to them. In the last 15 years, 52% of the Fortune 500 companies have disappeared. This is the second big point. So our first big point is we show that there is a major change going on. And that was the subscription, in Zora's case, the subscription economy. Now we have to show that there will be winners and losers. It gives them the choice. It seeds this decision for them. Like, are you going to be a winner or are you going to be a loser? So sometimes it's really helpful to show, maybe this looks, in an SEO standpoint, this looks like a competitor slide, right? Look at your competitors kind of falling off, trailing off over time. Or if it's more beneficial, show them that their competitors are winning in search, right? Show exactly what's going on. But Zora here is showing that things have changed. So over all of this time, these Fortune 500 companies are disappearing. Their life expectancy was 75 years, and now it's 15 years. There will be winners and losers, and we want our prospect, the person that we're pitching, to feel this loss aversion. We don't want, they'll be like, oh, I don't want to be one of those losers. And they're starting to open themselves more to, yes, I want this solution. I want to know what's coming. I want to know how to be a winner, right? And we want to show how the winners have shifted. So Zora, in their case, they show all of these like other companies that have shifted and are doing better, IBM, Unilever, et cetera. So there's a bunch of different examples from these in their deck, but it's really important to show like, you can be a winner too. And now we're going to present that new opportunity to them. There's a couple more slides. But at this point, the common thread for Zora is that if you want to be a winner, you have to adopt the subscription economy model. You have to adopt it. You have to change. You have the old Fortune 500 way of doing business has to die. And if you want to thrive and survive in the future, you have to adopt the subscription model. Right? Back to the hero's journey. We had talked about this death and rebirth. Now they finally kind of change. They're ready to grow. They're ready to adapt. So I think it's really important here to understand how they show this. I have two different versions for you because I like really, we can call it funnel hacking or whatever, but I like really went deep into Zora and how they do this, and actually found multiple versions of this deck and how it grew over time. Because I wanted to confirm, like, as I was learning this, and this, gosh, this must have been a couple of years ago that I started picking up on this and using this strategy, but I wanted to know how they had changed and evolved their presentation over time. Because now we're going to move on to the third point. So we've talked about how there's this big macro change happening. We've established there will be winners and losers. And now we're going to start like teasing the promised land, right? We're going to show them what they can do in the future. We've showed who the winners and losers are, but now we're going to start talking about what they need to do. And this is where we might hop in with what we teach in the blueprint, whether it's a quality audit or something, things that we found in our preparation for this proposal call that they could do that will help them. And we're going to then offer to do these things for them. But we want to start teasing that promised land, right? We want to resist the urge to start talking about ourselves. Because if you notice, like I'm looking at my slides here, I'm on slide 31 of 42 slides, and I haven't talked about myself yet. And I think way too often we're so eager to sell, we're so excited that we dive right in. We're like, here's our clients, here's all the people we've worked with, here's all these testimonials, here's our case studies, and here's what we think you should do. And it's like me, I, and you haven't shown any level of empathy. You haven't done any, I keep using this word salesmanship, but like, you haven't shown any level of like, I understand you, I understand your story. We have a shared history. We have this macro change that we're going to tackle together. I'm going to guide you through it so that you're not one of the losers. This positioning in this really, really makes a huge difference in your close rate. That's why we put at the headline of this when we were starting the Facebook Live today. This closes 60 to 90% when you do it right. It's really, really, really powerful, because now we're going to give them the details. We have built up all of this suspense and interest in like, yeah, but how? And now we're going to start explaining that to them again, like a second version, right? And Zora explains here, what's going to happen here is that there's this new way of thinking. We're going to present to them the new opportunity. There's this new way of thinking about SEO, and this is your positioning. This is how you do SEO differently than everybody else. Because let's be honest, SEO is so commoditized. Everybody says they can do it. The people you're pitching get those emails for like $99. We rank you number one. Like, okay, but it's commoditized. So what is your positioning? What is, again, like things we teach in Blueprint? What is your positioning? What is your offer? How is it productized, right? We're going to share that with them now. There's this new way of thinking about SEO. And here's the old way, and here's the new way. And they start to go, oh, that changes everything. And they even like, look, Zora lays it out. They even have like old way, new way. You could have a slide just like this. Old way was traffic and keyword difficulty. New way, revenue focused content. We're only going to produce content that drives revenue for you. We're not going to do the old way of like, well, we did a keyword export, especially if your prospect is savvy. You can say this stuff to them. We're not going to do the keyword export where it's like, then we sort it by difficulty and traffic, and then that's our content strategy. Like we're past that. It's 2021. That doesn't work as well as it used to anymore. There's a new way of doing things. And now we reach this next piece of the hero's journey where they get the gift, right? We want to introduce our features. As these, like they're called in the hero's journey, magic gifts, right? This is the Harry Potter's wand. This is Luke Skywalker's lightsaber, getting Anakin's old lightsaber. Like they get these magic gifts for overcoming obstacles, right? But successful sales decks follow this same narrative structure as all of these films, as all of these fairy tales, right? You can be the fairy godmother to Cinderella, whatever analogy we want to use. Now that if you've never heard of the hero's journey, you're going to see this everywhere. And you're going to be like, oh my God, this is every book that I love, every story that I love. And this is true across cultures and across history. So if you think it won't work in a sales deck, I mean, this crushes, trust me. So now we're going to give them the gifts. We're going to give them the things that we found that can help them based on our unique framework, based on our positioning and our offer that is different than everybody else's offer out there. And Zora does the same thing, right? They talk about the structure of a customer record and the subscriber identity, all these different things. They explained that's why we built Zora. We built Zora because we saw this. There was no other way to do this. If we could have done it the old way, we would have. But now we found this new way, and we want to share that with you. We have returned from, our adventures from this death and rebirth and all of these things, and we're ready to share it with you. And this is where you can find, like you've shared with them, your unique offer, your unique positioning, all this different stuff. Now we can talk about, hey, there's a couple case studies I wanted to share with you that I think are really relevant based on what we talked about. You can talk about those. You can show a testimonial. Zora has these like great testimonials at the end of their slides, etc. And don't overcomplicate it. This is their last slide. It just says the end, because they've gone through the entire hero's journey at this point. There's no reason to keep going with it. If they're not ready to make a buying decision at this point, we can talk through like bigger sales process stuff. But in terms of a proposal, structuring your proposal along the hero's journey, first of all, let's be honest, it's more fun. Like I have a lot more fun talking about this sort of thing and making these kind of proposals than something generic where it's like, I don't know, just the generic SEO proposal where you just try and show how smart you are the whole time. Like, I think people are over that. And then they get a presentation like this and they're like, oh, I like this, right? They don't even know why they like it. I think it's ingrained in our DNA to be attached to these kind of stories. So Zora just ends there. Ryan, were you going to say something?
I was going to say we have some questions.
Yeah, man, I would love to answer some questions. I know we went through that pretty quickly, so happy to answer any questions.